Welcome to Lecture 4 of the Research Methods and Ethics in Science course. The topic is Literature Review, and this is Dr. Elifiano. The meaning of a literature review. Literature refers to the knowledge of a particular area of investigation of any discipline, which includes theoretical, practical, and its research studies. The term review means to organize the knowledge of the specific area of research to evolve an edifice of knowledge to show that his study would be an addition to this field. The task of literature review is highly creative and tedious because the researcher has to synthesize the available knowledge of the field in a unique way to provide a rationale for his study. In the previous lecture, we identified a broad area where we narrowed down to a sub area. Then we looked at identifying a research problem or formulating a research problem, and then identifying main and sub objectives. So for instance, if you want to use the same scenario where we looked at the broad area of salt and then a sub area of salt production and narrowed down to the research objectives, if you are doing a literature review, you must review literature on salt production, and all the literature available that you can find in this area. You are going to identify that literature by doing a search, identify the relevant literature that would make sense as pertains your study, and then you are going to do a review. You must review the literature in such a way that at the end of the day, you must be able to convince the reader that your work is important. So it is not just reviewing the literature and reporting what other people have done, but you must build arguments that would convince the reader that your work is actually necessary and it will add to the body of knowledge. According to W.R. Borg, the literature in any field forms the foundation upon which all future work will be built. If we fail to build the foundation of knowledge provided by the review of literature, our work is likely to be shallow and naive and will often duplicate work that has already been done better by someone else. According to John W. Best, practically all human knowledge can be found in books and libraries. Unlike other animals that must start anew with each generation, man builds upon the accumulated and recorded knowledge of the past. His constant adding to the vast store of knowledge makes possible progress in all areas of human endeavor. So in effect, as I stated earlier, it would be unnecessary to just review previous work and report them as it is. Your review must be convincing and must show that there is a need for you to conduct that research, and the outcomes should add to the body of knowledge. Otherwise, it will just be a shallow review. The literature review has two phases. One involves identifying all the relevant published material in the problem area and reading that part of it with which we are not thoroughly familiar. We develop the foundation of ideas and results on which our own study will be built. 2. It involves writing this foundation of ideas into a section of the research report. This section is for the joint benefit of the researchers and the readers. For the researcher, it establishes the background in the field. for the readers. It provides a summary of the thinking and research necessary for them to understand the study. So what this means is that first and foremost, the researcher has to do a thorough review and try to glean from the literature new ideas. Definitely the researcher might have prior knowledge of the subject area, but then through the review, the researcher is likely to come by some new knowledge and then come up with certain ideas based on the findings of the literature review, especially in the areas that are quite new to the researcher or new knowledge gained. So it means that the first step is to do the review using previous knowledge, try and get new knowledge, get findings from already published work, and then you need to communicate this to the reader. But it must be done in such a way that the reader does not need to struggle, because the bottom line is that anybody who picks up any part of your research report should be able to understand what is in your mind. So you must be able to communicate whatever ideas that you have in your mind clearly in the research report. Functions of the literature review. 1. It provides a theoretical background to your study. 2. It helps you establish the links between what you are proposing to examine and what has already been studied. 3. It enables you to show how your findings have contributed to the existing body of knowledge in your profession. And 4. It helps you to integrate your research findings into the existing body of knowledge. In relation to your own study, the literature review can help in 4 ways. 1. Bringing clarity and focus to your research problem. The literature review involves a paradox. On the one hand, you cannot effectively undertake a literature search without some idea of the problem you wish to investigate. On the other hand, the literature review can play an extremely important role in shaping your research problem, because the process of reviewing the literature helps you to understand the subject area better, and thus helps you to conceptualize your research problem clearly and precisely, and makes it more relevant and pertinent to your field of inquiry. When reviewing the literature, you learn what aspects of your subject area have been examined by others, what they have found out about these aspects, what gaps they have identified, and what suggestions they have made for further research. The literature review is likely to change your perspective of the research problem, because whilst you see the problem in one dimension, the review would allow you to see the problem from other dimensions, because people have done previous work and looked at it from a different perspective. Apart from that, there are findings or aspects of their research report would fine-tune your idea of the research problem. So it's a paradox, because you, at the back of your mind, you have seen a research problem, or you have formulated a research problem, but the literature is actually trying to take you a little bit away from the way you see the problem. So that is how come it becomes a paradox. Improving your research methodology. Going through the literature acquaints you with the methodologies that have been used by others to find answers to research questions similar to the one you are investigating. A literature review tells you if others have used procedures and methods similar to the ones that you are proposing, which procedures and methods have worked well for them, and what problems they have faced with them. By becoming aware of any problems and pitfalls, you will be better positioned to select a methodology that is capable of providing valid answers to your research question. This will increase your confidence in the methodology you plan to use and will equip you to defend its use. 3. Broadening your knowledge base in your research area. The most important function of the literature review is to ensure you read widely around the subject area in which you intend to conduct your research study. It is important that you know what other researchers have found in regard to the same or similar questions, what theories have been put forward, and what gaps exist in the relevant body of knowledge. When you undertake a research project, you are expected to be an expert in your area of research. A thorough literature review helps you to fulfill this expectation. Another important reason for doing a literature review is that it helps you to understand how findings of your study fit into the existing body of knowledge. 4. Enabling you to contextualize your findings. Obtaining answers to your research questions is comparatively easy. The difficult part is examining how your findings fit into the existing body of knowledge. How do answers to your research questions compare with what others have found? What contribution have you been able to make to the existing body of knowledge? How are your findings different from those of others? Undertaking a literature review will enable you to compare your findings with those of others and answer those questions. It is important to place your findings in the context of what is already known in your field of inquiry. So it is not only enough for you to report your findings. The study does not end there, because you need to position your findings against what previous studies have found out. So for instance, if you carry out a study that gives certain results and you are convinced that you have gone through a thorough process of data analysis, etc., you will still have to compare your findings to findings that others have published or already existing findings. And where there are discrepancies, you must be able to iron them out in a very logical way. So that is a lot of work. So coming out with the findings is not just the end of the work, but it is how you can relate it to previous findings. How to review the literature. There are 4 steps involved in conducting a literature review. 1. Searching for the existing literature in your area of study. 2. Reviewing the selected literature. 3. Developing a theoretical framework. And 4. Developing a conceptual framework. 1. Searching for the existing literature. To search effectively for the literature in your field of inquiry, it is imperative that you have at least some idea of the broad subject area and of the problem you wish to investigate, in order to set parameters for your search. Next, compile a bibliography for this broad area. There are 3 sources that you can use to prepare a bibliography. A. Books. B. Journals. And C. The internet. So for instance, if we are to use the example of the research problem revolving around the production of salt, then it means that as a researcher, you must be able to create a bibliography which would include all relevant books, journals, etc. that are based on salt production. So you are going to use that list of all sources to do your literature review, and it is imperative that you find as many sources as possible so that you can do a very comprehensive literature review. Reviewing books. Select 10 to 15 books that you think are appropriate for your topic. Examine the bibliography of each one. Go through the bibliographies carefully to identify the books common to several of them. If a book has been referenced by a number of authors, you should include it in your reading list. Prepare a final list of books that you consider essential reading. Having prepared your reading list, locate these books in your library or borrow them from other sources. Examine their contents to double check that they really are relevant to your topic. If you find that a book is not relevant to your research, delete it from your reading list. If you find that something in a book's contents is relevant to your topic, make an annotated bibliography. An annotated bibliography contains a brief abstract of the aspects covered in a book and your own notes of its relevance. So, if you select those 10 to 15 books, you should be able to locate the bibliography, which is normally found at the last end of the book, and it details all the sources of references. Okay, so a bibliography contains both books, sources that have been referenced in text and those that have not been referenced. So it contains all sources, both reference and non reference. So you go through and then you try to identify references that are common amongst all the books, and it indicates that they do have a lot of content. So you use that to create your reading list. Now, whilst you are going through your reading list, you should have a way of indicating certain salient points that you find whilst going through the books. So the annotated bibliography simply means that if you are reading book A and anything that you find interesting or relevant to your topic, and you think you should make a special note of it, you do that so that you don't need to go back looking for those notes again. So those notes should have it should be a summary of the ideas, etc., as well as the book, the page numbers, paragraph numbers, etc. Reviewing journals. Identify any useful journals and articles. Prepare a list of those you want to examine by journal. Select one of these journals and, starting with the latest issue, examine its contents page to see if there is an article of relevance to your research topic. If you feel that a particular article is of interest to you, read its abstract. If you think you are likely to use it, depending upon your financial resources, either photocopy it or prepare a summary and record its reference for later use. Each of these indexing, abstracting, and citation services is available in print or accessible through the internet. In most libraries, information on books, journals, and abstracts is stored on computers. In each case, the information is classified by subject, author, and title. You may also have the keywords option. That is, author stroke keyword, title stroke keyword, subject stroke keyword, expert stroke keyword, or just keywords. So it means you need to identify relevant journals, and these journals have articles of related topics. So for instance, if you are interested in doing your work in salt production, you must look for journals that publish articles related to that. So if you are able to get access to these journals, you must then look for relevant articles. And whilst you are reviewing these articles, you have to use their abstracts to then find out whether they will be relevant or not. So depending on the way you want to go about it, the most convenient way, you must find a way of identifying these relevant articles first, and you must have a way of isolating them for future reading, so that you don't need to identify an article and then the next thing is you don't know how to locate it again. So when you identify these relevant articles, you might find a way of locating them again for further reading. And in subsequent lectures, we will look at how to do that. But for now, you must bear in mind that this is the way you have to approach it. And then whilst you have all these relevant articles, you can then start reviewing them one by one and doing your review and trying to make some progress in doing a very fine literature review. There are several databases that have indexed thousands of articles depending on certain criteria. So if you have access to these databases, you can run searches, or you can run series of searches using the subject area, the author, or the title, and it depending on the way you want to go about it. So if the key thing is to have access to these databases. Google Scholar is one of the most popular databases where you can search for your articles depending on the subject area. We would look at these databases in detail as we move on in the course. Searching the internet. An internet search is carried out through search engines, of which there are many, though the most commonly used are Google and Yahoo. Searching through the internet is very similar to the search for books and articles in a library using an electronic catalog, as it is based on the use of keywords. An internet search basically identifies all material in a database of a search engine that contains the keywords you specify, either individually or in combination. It is important that you choose words or combinations of words that other people are likely to use. So it essentially means that, similar to the search for articles, using the search engines relies on databases and keywords. So depending on the keywords that you use for your search, the relevant or corresponding articles or books, etc., will be retrieved. Reviewing the selected literature. Now that you have identified several books and articles as useful, the next step is to start reading them critically to pull together themes or headings and issues that are of relevance to your study. Use separate sheets of paper for each theme or issue you identify as you go through selected books and articles. As you read further, go on slotting the information where it logically belongs under the themes so far developed. Keep in mind that you may need to add more themes as you go along. What this means is that whilst you do your review, you will Identify themes. Themes can be also called subheadings or subtopics or headings. And as the researcher, you will find these themes as you do your review. For instance, if you are doing a review on a topic around, let's say, the coronavirus, you are likely to find themes such as the mode of transmission, immunology, the nature of the virus itself or its makeup and its genetics, etc. So as you go on, you will find these themes and you will develop content under these themes. So for instance, if you go along and you, for instance, see identify a theme like, for instance, mode of transmission, you would write mode of transmission, for instance, and then using a separate sheet, you will be building content on mode of transmission as you go on. So you'll be adding the content as you go on the review. Similarly, you might have separate sheets having all the different themes. So as you go along, then you build up content on those themes, which you would eventually try to put together and present in your report. So basically, that is how you build the content under the various themes. While going through the literature, you should carefully and critically examine it with respect to the following aspects. Note whether the knowledge relevant to your theoretical framework has been confirmed beyond doubt. Note that theories put forward, the criticisms of these and their basis, the methodologies adopted, study design, sample size and its characteristics, measurement procedures, etc., and the criticisms of them. Examine to what extent the findings can be generalized to other situations. Notice where there are significant differences of opinion among researchers and give your opinion about the validity of these differences. Ascertain the areas in which little or nothing is known. That's the gaps that exist in the body of knowledge. So it is essential that in confirming the theoretical framework that you wish to adopt, that framework does not have ambiguities, and as much as possible you want to avoid adopting theories that have certain loopholes. So it is important that when you decide on theories, they must be in quote foolproof, and you should be able to defend these theories with relevant accepted literature. And if you want to adopt certain models that have been developed previously, then they must be peer reviewed and generally accepted. Developing a theoretical framework. As you start reading a literature, you will soon discover that the problem you wish to investigate has its roots in a number of theories that have been developed from different perspectives. The information obtained from different books and journals now needs to be sorted under the main themes and theories, highlighting agreements and disagreements among the authors and identifying the unanswered questions or gaps. You will also realize that the literature deals with a number of aspects that you have a direct or indirect bearing on your research topic. Use these aspects as a basis for developing your theoretical framework. Literature pertinent to your study may deal with two types of information: one universal and two more specific, i.e., local trends or specific program. In writing about such information, you should start with the general information, gradually narrowing it down to the specific. As I mentioned previously, you do not wish to have a theoretical framework that is surrounded with uncertainties, unresolved um, disagreements, and ambiguities. So, whilst doing your literature review, before you finalize a theoretical framework, you must be sure that you have looked at uh, other competing or conflicting theories and look at arguments that have been advanced for or against each of these theories, and ensure you have dealt with all ambiguities surrounding the theory. So, in essence, before you finalize your framework, you should have been able to convince the reader uh, by putting enough content in there to show the reader that all issues surrounding that theoretical framework has been dealt with in your write-up. Developing a conceptual framework. The conceptual framework is the basis of your research problem. It stems from the theoretical framework and usually focuses on the section or sections which become the basis of your study. Whereas the theoretical framework consists of the theories or issues in which your study is embedded, the conceptual framework describes the aspects you selected from the theoretical framework to become the basis of your inquiry. Hence, the conceptual framework grows out of the theoretical framework and relates to the specific research problem. Thus, the conceptual framework is an integrated framework which captures the linkages between the theoretical framework, research problem, uh, and in most cases, research questions, and captures the whole study in one complete piece. So a glance at the conceptual framework should tell the reader how all these aspects of the research study are interrelated. Writing about the literature reviewed. Two of the broad functions of a literature review are: one, to provide a theoretical background to your study, and two, to enable you to contextualize your findings in relation to the existing body of knowledge, in addition to refining your methodology. In order to fulfill the first purpose, you should identify and describe various theories relevant to your field and specify gaps in existing knowledge in the area, recent advances in the area of study, current trends, and so on. While reading the literature for theoretical background of your study, you will realize that certain themes have emerged. List the main ones, converting them into subheadings. These subheadings should be precise, descriptive of the theme in question, and follow a logical progression. The second broad function of the literature review, contextualizing the findings of your study, requires you to compare very systematically your findings with those made by others. Quote from these studies to show how your findings contradict, confirm, or add to them. It places your findings in the context of what others have found out, providing complete reference in an acceptable format. This function is undertaken, as mentioned earlier, when writing about your findings, that is, after analysis of your data. Thanks for watching.